Hello and welcome back to Disney Journey. I'm retired Imagineer Jim Shull, and before I started this episode, my mind was circling. I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. And then suddenly, blammo, I knew what it was. This is going to be the story of the Disney Ferris wheels.
Or to be more accurate, Ferris wheels in the Disney parks. Because Disney did not invent Ferris wheels. That was an old staple ride that you'd find in expositions, World's Fairs, trolley parks, amusement parks, and the like. It would have been unusual had not the original Fantasyland team, people like Bushman and Bill Martin, not considered having a Ferris wheel in their version of Fantasyland. It didn't occur the way they planned because their Ferris wheel ended up on Main Street, USA.
During the time when Disneyland needed something to sell, the people up in WDI in Glendale were busy developing new rides, but they weren't ready. So Anaheim decided to do seasonal events, and that's where we got Blast of the Past and the State Fair. I mean, who among us don't remember the pig races and Ferris wheels? The Ferris wheel was a rented device, and it went on Main Street, USA.
From the marketing aspect, the idea was brilliant. From the execution, not so much. And the wheel was accompanied by another idea.
This was also the time period when the gift giver was located in the hub of Disneyland. This was part of the 35th anniversary celebration for the park. It's long remembered, not well regarded, but at least as a result, we have the partner statue. And was created for the hub so this would never, ever happen again.
More than 40 years ago, the State Fair brought to Disneyland a Ferris wheel. But Disney was going to be dabbling with a Ferris wheel very soon once again.
When the Walt Disney Company was deciding on where their second gate in Southern California would be located, it was between Anaheim, which was a natural choice, and Long Beach. Now, Long Beach came to be into the possession of the Disney Company when they acquired the Rather Corporation. And that was part of the Rather portfolio. And so they kicked the tires for a while. And for a while, it looked like Long Beach, Disney Sea in Long Beach, would be the winner. But it was not to be because Anaheim was the choice. And out of that, it started a chain of events to create Disney California Adventure, Paradise Pier, and the Sun Wheel.
The Ferris wheels at the Queen Mary and earlier in Main Street, USA, provided Disney with important lessons. And these lessons would serve WDI very well as they started to develop Disney's California Adventure. There in the parking lot, the preview center tent was erected, and guests could go inside to see concept artwork of all the different districts. And among the districts was Paradise Pier, which was a great idea because it was based upon the legacy and the history of California amusement piers. Chief among the rides was one based upon the old famous Wonder Wheel. A spin, pun intended, on the old Ferris wheel. But this one was different because it had two different ways to ride. You had the vehicles that were stationary, and you had the ones that were on tracks, and they behaved exactly the way roller coasters would.
Only a handful of Wonder Wheels still exist, and those that do still continue to delight riders.
And so this classic amusement ride found its way to DCA to become an icon at Paradise Pier when the park opened.
Disney's California Adventure was going to have a different mission than Disneyland. It was going to be big and modern. It was going to be contemporary. And it was going to have Paradise Pier, which was going to have the majority of the ride capacity in this park. It was a celebration of old amusement piers. Now, as part of that was going to be the Ferris wheel or the Wonder Wheel. Now, this was large, which would make it an icon for the park. It would be relatively cheap to buy and cheap to install. And it was going to have really good capacity.
The Sun Wheel at Paradise Pier fulfilled part of the mission brief for DCA, which was to be a very different park from the one across the Esplanade, Disneyland. And it was going to have a different design aesthetic and different feel, celebrating and showcasing steel, technology, machinery. Not that people particularly like that, and things would change. And there was a reason for the change, because as I just said, it was a celebration of steel, but steel is hard to love. People like characters. They don't like machines. The result is that the Sun Wheel was retired, and Mickey Mouse took center stage, because Mickey Mouse is loved. No one could argue with that. Mickey Mouse is also talented, and he's a friendly fellow who enjoys a good beverage, an all-around swell guy.
When Disney's California Adventure dropped the apostrophe, the Sun Wheel got a facelift. The surgery was quick, it was painless, and very shortly, the smiling face of Mickey Mouse was smiling down upon everyone there in Paradise Pier.
Once the face on the Sun Wheel was peeled off, the face of Mickey Mouse went up very quickly. It was a printed face, and so it was unrolled and hung as if you were hanging a drape. It doesn't sound very glamorous, but the effect was phenomenal and impactful. Few the changes in realizing DCA's 2.0 had as much immediate impact, as did making the Sun Wheel into the Mickey Fun Wheel. Because at 150-foot tall height, it was dominating. And what had been something that was a bit off-putting now had a cheerful character face beaming down on the guest. And that, with a completely beautiful lighting package, transformed Paradise Pier. The success of Mickey's Fun Wheel ensured that it would endure, even when it became part of the Pixar Pier change, as Pixar Pier took over Paradise Pier. This overlay of the characters from the Pixar catalog impacted everything, including the wheel, because suddenly it became the Pixar pal around. However, through it all, Mickey's face stayed on the wheel as part of Pixar Pier. Next up, the idea of a Ferris wheel found its home, at least as an idea, in Disney's Hollywood studios. Because for the 100 Years of Magic, there were several ideas batted around for an icon. And one of them was to take two, not one, but two Ferris wheels and apply them to either side of a Sorcerer's Mickey's hat. They talked about putting it at the front of the park, but it ended up in the hub, which it would transform.
The Sorcerer's Hat was only meant to be in the hub of Hollywood Studios until 100 Years of Magic completed. And once that ended, it was supposed to be torn down. But it wasn't. It became the headquarters for all pin trading in that park. Eventually, the bulldozers did move in, and that hat was not removed, it was destroyed. And today we get to enjoy the original view of the park as it was intended to be.
Euro Disneyland, a park that I was deeply involved with, which later on became Disneyland Paris, got the next Ferris wheel. And this one would be very different. I was part of the additional capacity team in charge of 10 new ride shows and attractions that would come to the park after it opened. I was specifically in charge of the Ferris wheel that would go into Fantasyland. Now, I looked around and I thought, we need to not have something that's a beautiful showcase of steel and technology. It has to be grounded in story. It has to be cute. And what's cuter than an old mill?
The old mill there in Fantasyland was a food service facility, never a ride. That wasn't the design intent. However, my challenge was to keep that food facility, buy a new ride, clad it, create a ride mechanism that appeared to power the Ferris wheel from the windmill, and also create new dining. Oh, and by the way, make that whole thing a new gateway for the expansion of Fantasyland.
The old mill there in Fantasyland took its inspiration from real old mills, and I took my inspiration from the canal boats. I drew a little bit, doodled a little bit, colored a little bit, and ended up with something that I thought worked. The windmill would power water buckets, and having the water buckets next to a stream that would then connect to Storybook Land would provide great connective tissue, I thought. The next step was to go and find a ride, which we found from a ride vendor who offered as a standard item in their ride catalog. Now, of course, we didn't want that. So as much effort was expended as you could possibly have imagined to take that steel column and make it look like it was wood and oak, and the screw would rotate and it would turn the wheel buckets, and people would have a story-based ride experience. As the project's creative director, I was with the show team where we spent many hours arguing about what kind of grain would the oak tree have? What kind of color would it have? How big would the knots be? Would there be knots? It really didn't matter in the long run, but everything had to kind of work as a piece. My goal was that the old mill looked like it was always intended to be there in Fantasyland and never looked like it was a late ad. The ride itself was successful. If it suffered at all, it was suffering from lack of capacity. It was simply not able to carry all of the guests who wanted to ride, and that's never a good thing. Coupled with the fact that you had a park that, well, they didn't have a lot of financial wherewithal. That meant the old mill Ferris wheel suddenly became a Christmas decoration, and finally it was decommissioned. Today, there's nothing left of the old mill other than the original structure, which is a shame. The guests loved it. It provides story context for Fantasyland, and it was just a lot of fun to ride and look at. Ferris wheels in the Disney parks have come and gone, and it's an idea that the parks continue to circle around.
Our ride has come to a stop, and it's time to get off the Ferris wheel. Join me next time on Disney Journey for another set of stories about the Disney parks. And if you haven't already, please now go like and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. Until the next time then, it's goodbye from Lost Canyon.